Uhuru, and that's the Swahili word for freedom. My name is Gaida Kambon. I am the Secretary General of the African People's Socialist Party, USA.
The first question is, do you think the collisions between the black community and the police originate from provocations on the part of the police state and justified by American laws?
Yes, absolutely yes. I think that African people live in this country under a police state. I think the police is the first line of defense for the state, and we live under colonialism. And yes, the laws and all of the institutions, carry out the mandate of colonialism, so that African people live in a different, even though we live in the same city, the same country as white people, there are two different Americas. There's an America for Africans and there's an America for white people. And the police operates differently in both these communities. Just a common thing in the African community, if a police comes up behind you in the African community, whether you have license and you satisfy all the laws, you still get very, very nervous because you expect that the police was going to do something to you, either arrest you, give you a ticket. And white people don't have the same sentiment. They're very friendly. They think it's a good thing that the police, is accompanying them, and we don't feel the same way. There are some universal qualities of colonialism that we see worldwide. The same, if you went to Palestine, if you watched the Palestinian people on television, if you watched the Afghanistan people on television, the poor colonized Afghanistan, you see the same traits as you would see inside of our country. Not our country, but inside of the United States. And, just recently I was reminded of the similarities when in Ferguson, and I don't know if you know a lot about Ferguson, Missouri, but also in the city where I live in St. Petersburg, we actually saw tanks rolling down our streets. Similar, and somebody that came into this community from afar would have thought that they were in Afghanistan or Palestine. They were actual military tanks, military occupation, including the police and all of the different military arms of the state in our community to so-called put down the just rebellions of the people. The people were reacting to the police murders that happens inside of this country, where I think it's every 17 hours, there's an African kill, and in various cities around this country. So it's not just an isolated thing, but it has become policy. It's become U.S. policy. And even subsequent to the notorious Mike Brown's murder, every single day, the count goes up, and up and up. And one would think that after all of what happened with Mike Brown, that the country or the government would cease and desist, but instead it has escalated. And even today in St. Louis, in Ferguson, where St. Louis, where Ferguson is, that there have been just a recent killing there. I think it was yesterday. It's right now under martial law, under state of emergency. So this is on one long continuum. Yes, I would say absolutely yes. The other thing that would prove this is the enormous prison population, 2.3 million Africans in prison in this country, a country that is smaller than China, with a greater population, have far less, and I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but far less prison population than the United States. Got the highest prison population in the world. And, and the majority of those prisoners are Africans and Mexicans. So absolutely, I don't think there's anything that would refute that.
What has changed in the problem of racial abuse and intolerance since the time of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X?
Nothing, absolutely nothing. Martin Luther King was abused. Martin Luther King was murdered in this country. The point that he departed from, could not support or promote nonviolence because of this was during the period of Vietnam, when he raised the question, how could I, talk against violence when, as violent as America has been and is in Vietnam, he was murdered at that point, because he wasn't carrying out the policy that they wanted to see in terms of, the government wanted to see in terms of nonviolence. So that, no, the government had policy, and they still continue with those policies that crushes and intimidate anybody that would any colonized person from the African community that would show this leadership and that would, you know, really show resistance, promote self-determination. They become targeted in this country by the United States government. They've had policies, national policies, COINTELPRO, the counterinsurgency program, that was targeting the Black Panther Party. I mean, and expressly said that the Black Panther Party was going to be liquidated and wiped out within a period of 3 years, and they didn't. They carried it out, and there was no outcry from nobody, no place in the world. There was no outcry. There was no UN intervention. You know, the African community took the brunt of that war that had been waged, you know, against the community, and they used all kinds of mechanisms. You know, we have, you know, chemical warfare. They opposed drug economy in the community, and then used that economy that was imposed by the United States government. They removed the legal economy and created a desert, a economic desert in our community. There's an economic embargo around our community where there's no work, there's no way for people to support themselves in our community. And then once they removed that, then they dumped an illegal economy, a drug economy into our community, and then used that economy that they imposed to lock up, to fill the prisons and create an economy for white people, you know, from prisons. So, you know, and not only did they use that to fill the prison, but they also used that to kill Africans. You know, they had different laws, you know, varying from, you know, if there were cocaine that was utilized by the white community exclusively, they had a different penalty for cocaine. You could have tons of cocaine as compared to the derivative of cocaine, which was crack, which we think that crack, and we almost know that crack was made by somebody outside of the African community, was made by the state. If not the state, was, you know, the drug lords that the state support. You know, if you were caught with a grain or maybe a little tiny rock of cocaine, you would pay more for this derivative than you would pay for the actual pure cocaine, because pure cocaine was a drug of choice for white people. And so you have same country, two different laws governing the use of the drug and its derivative, you know, and African people were paying heavy penalties, you know, for the drug that was imposed in our community. So today, what we think is different is that what we see is the African community and African young people are now moving, you know, in a great way of resistance. You know, there's a high level of consciousness that's going on into the community right now, and young people are at the head of this, you know, the movement. You know, so we see resistance everywhere. You know, all around the country there is resistance, and this is something new. Everybody's getting involved. You see a lot of rejection of the status quo, a rejection of imperialist and capitalist policies and ideology. We see it right manifesting itself even in the legitimate elections and campaigns that's been run right now. You know, in the ruling class election, you see a rejection of, you know, of status quo. That's what Donald Trump is about. That, you know, it's not just Donald Trump that they're flocking, but it is a whole, anything that you know, ostracizes the status quo, anything that talks against things as they are in general is being elevated. And you see Donald Trump is being right now elevated, you know, as well as Bernie, I can't remember what his last name is, from Bernie Sanders from the Democratic Party. We see a rejection of Hillary Clinton, who represents the status quo, and that's what's happening even in the election. People don't want to hear it anymore. They don't want to hear business as usual. They don't want to hear support for the ruling class and for capitalism. You know, they're rejecting it, you know, and that's what's the whole rejection, and it's electric what's going on, especially with poor people and oppressed people. At the advent of Obama, who people saw, and I'm talking about people in the African community, was put in place for different reason, by the white people. But the African community thought, that this would be the salvation. An African president would mean that things were about to change for us, and it did change. It got worse. And so that was the last card, that imperialism had to play. They used what we call the neo-colonialist strategy, that we've seen used in places like South Africa with Mandela. We've seen that now been utilized here, but the advent of Obama and the way things are in the community, and a lot of people that went in with Obama are now falling out of grace with Obama, that now do not want to hear anything about Obama, and they have nowhere to turn but rightfully to their own understanding and a different politics. So what we see happening right now is a great period, in this country and around the world, where working and poor people are now rising up to throw off the yokes of capitalism and imperialism. So it's excellent time, for us, for colonized people, Mexicans, Africans, Puerto Ricans in this country.